Welcome to the Harbor Thoughts podcast. This is your host, Madeline. Here at Harbor Thoughts, we divulge the deep, dark thoughts that we rarely choose to voice. The intention of the Harbor Thoughts podcast is to break the stronghold these thoughts may have on us and bring light to some of the skeletons in our closets. Let's chat. This is the first episode of the Harbor Thoughts podcast. So I will provide some context into why I decided to begin this podcast and how a typical episode will work. Today will be different than episodes in the future because today I'm just going to set the stage, but I also will explain how I typically want the future episodes to look. Today I will just be speaking by myself and providing a little bit of background to who I am and why this podcast is something that I felt compelled to begin. But for future episodes, it will be me interviewing another person, or it will be a partner podcast. And I will be recording these podcasts in my living room with me and my co-hosts. And why is it important that we talk about harbor thoughts amongst each other? Why is this format important to me? Let's start by talking about what even is a harbored thought. And I am using this phrase basically as an intrusive thought that is stuck in your mind. Something that we are holding on to and can't let go of. Like something is anchored and it is deep rooted and you cannot get the stronghold to lift from these thoughts or habit patterns. And the reason why I thought this would be fun to do in a partner setting, because intrusive thoughts are something that I at least have felt the need to not share, or are something that I would maybe write down in a diary or only think about in private. But I think part of keeping these thoughts secretive makes it seem bad, or makes those thoughts seem worse maybe than they actually are. And so sharing these thoughts with each other is something that I wanted to do that I've never done before, because I think it will help make these thoughts that feel really big and bad and scary and something that may have dominated my brainwaves. If you say it, then it's no longer as scary as when it's just running over and over in your mind. In order for me to have some consistency when I interview my various co-hosts, is that I want to have a set of questions that I ask each guest. And the first question will be, when you hear the phrase intrusive thoughts, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? The second question is, what does it feel like when you have a thought that you want to say but think that you shouldn't? The third question is, when is a time that you've experienced serendipity or some sort of inexplicable coincidence? The third question may seem a little bit unrelated to intrusive thoughts, but the connection there for me is that often when you have a thought ruminating over and over and over, it seems like something that's not within your control. You can't just get over it. And I think that something else that doesn't feel within your control is serendipity. So having a rumination is almost just the other side of the coin of serendipity in another light. That sort of makes sense to me. I don't know if that makes sense to you at all. Perhaps this makes no sense, but I feel like this is sort of two sides of a similar coin. Perhaps I will have more questions that are part of the routine, but I at least want those 3 to set the stage for the conversation of different people's experiences with intrusive thoughts. Now I want to go into a little bit more detail on what compelled me to start this podcast. And I'm going to back up to 2024. And in the spring, I quit my job and hiked from Mexico to Utah across the state of Arizona on a trail called the Arizona Trail. And it was an excellent time. Then later in July, I got a new job and life was good. And everything kind of just went back to normal. I had a corporate experience again, and I was living back in the city and no longer on the trail. And I had a little bit of a shift in my life, or at least a realization in my life in October of 2024. I was in Hawaii celebrating one of my best friend's birthdays, and it was my first time in Hawaii, and we were cycling around Kona, and it was stunningly beautiful, and it was truly one of the greatest vacations I've ever been on. But there were many times on that trip that I felt not like myself. I felt off, and I can't exactly pinpoint what felt wrong, but I just remember feeling or thinking to myself, I'm here in paradise with this incredible group of women. Why does something feel bad? What could make this wrong? And that was the first indication to me that I needed a little bit of a life reset. And I returned back home, and for January of 2025, I arbitrarily set my New Year's resolution to learn how to listen to my body. Because that's a phrase that I'd heard many times before, but really did not understand what that meant. The phrase, listen to your body, did not resonate to me at all. I felt like at times I didn't really have a strong sense of intuition. My whole life, I think I've really led with my mind and led with my thoughts and led with logic and using all these cerebral tactics to go through life. And then when I made it to Hawaii, I was like, I can't reason my way out of this. Something just feels off. So I need to learn what signals my body is telling me so that I can come back to reality, if that makes any sense at all. I want to add a little bit more background into what my life being led cerebrally looked like for me. When I was a kid, I would sometimes speak before I really thought about what I was saying. And at times this would cause me to put my foot in my mouth. I would say things that were not kind. And as a brash child, I didn't really feel apologetic. I just spoke my mind in an honest and truthful way to myself. But my mom instructed me in a very intelligent way and said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And this phrase was repeated to me many times throughout my childhood, which I now as an adult really appreciate having ingrained into me, because that phrase will come up again later in my life. Another phrase that she also instilled in me at a young age that resurfaced in a bizarre way was mind over matter. If I was going to sleep and I had a tummy ache, or if I just didn't feel well, she would say mind over matter. Just focus on the phrase mind over matter, mind over matter, mind over matter. And then eventually feeling unwell or just the slight queasiness, whatever I was experiencing, would go away because I would focus on the phrase mind over matter, and then I would be relieved. And this worked many times. So I was a bold child, definitely felt like I had a strong sense of self, a strong personality, and I didn't like to go with the status quo. I thought for myself and acted for myself. And again, was still really leading with my thoughts and not with my senses, not how I felt things, just how I thought about things. And being pragmatic and logically inclined led me to studying math, calculus in high school, and then I pursued mechanical engineering in college. And right now, my career is in the renewable energy field. I'm involved in solar energy, which I truly love. And I'm an applications engineer, which I truly love. It suits me very well. But now that I am 31 years old, I understand that I cannot think my way through all of my resolutions. And the way I really came to this realization was on this trip in Hawaii, when I was thinking, I can't not reason my way to feeling better, because by all logical senses, I should be exuberant. I should be vivacious. I should be having the greatest time ever. But I don't. I just feel a little off. And I guess the way I would describe it is feeling dim, feeling a little bit small. Like if you're a light bulb, I felt like my light bulb was getting dimmer instead of turning on and getting brighter and brighter. And when I set this resolution to learn how to listen to my body, a few months later, I also signed up for this silent meditation. And I went on this 10-day silent meditation. And this was another catalyst for my learning how to listen to your body journey. Before I went to this vipassana session, and vipassana is the name for the 10-day silent meditation retreat, if you will, I had very limited meditation experience. And the meditation experience that I had had was being instructed to sit with my back straight, with my legs crossed, and to allow thoughts to come into your mind, but don't give them any focus, and to just focus on breathing, etc. And I did not find this very effective. I felt myself being extremely distracted by my thoughts and not knowing what to be actually focusing on, or if I'm not focusing, what am I doing? It was very difficult. And similarly, I had also done something called a body scan before. And a body scan is where you're trying to also sit in stillness and also not focus on your thoughts, but to notice your physical sensations. If you're feeling aches or numbness or heat, or there's a number of different words, descriptors for what a body sensation is, but you're trying to identify where you are feeling those things in your body. And I tried to sit and go through my body parts, think, okay, what am I feeling on my face? What am I feeling in my hands? What am I feeling all throughout myself? I did not understand what that meant. Those instructions did not resonate with me. I felt like I feel nothing, or I feel my heart beating in my chest, and I feel my chest rising and falling as I'm inhaling and exhaling, but I don't really notice anything. And going into the vipassana with this very limited sensory understanding, it was not problematic at all, because each day of these 10 days, there were excellent instructions on how to focus your mind, where to put your attention, and explaining what was going on. And each evening there would be a 1-hour discourse with some explanations on, oh, this is day 1, you may be feeling this way, you're doing great, we will talk more day 2, etc. And again, the irony with this whole experience from meditating was that I wanted to understand it. Going into the session, I thought, oh, if I'm learning how to meditate, if I'm really focusing on awareness of my body, maybe I can feel what my body is doing. I can feel the processes of my body. Like, can I use my attention to know when my pancreas is excreting bile? Can I know when my kidneys are filtering out toxins? Like, is this the kind of sensation that I can identify? And perhaps the answer is that some people have this understanding or physiological connection, but that's certainly not true for me today. However, I still understand much better now what feeling your sensations means and what listening to your body means. And it's easy to figure that out when the sensations are really strong. Like, if I am walking down the street and I trip and fall and I feel embarrassed, the sensation that my body would experience would be a flushed face, or my breathing would increase. Like, embarrassment was a feeling that I could identify physical sensations very readily. But I think it's easy for people to kind of conflate emotion with sensation, and those are distinct. Like, if I'm feeling longing, if I'm longing for something, or if I'm longing for someone, and that's an emotion, what does that actually feel like? What in my body is tingling or vibrating or warm or cold? Like, how is this actually coming up in a sense, in a way that I can identify a sense? And that's much, much more difficult for me, but I understand that it exists. There is a connection between an emotion and a sensation. And through this meditation experience, I have learned that that is possible. And it was something that before the vipassana, I really didn't have a grasp on what that meant at all. The distinction between emotions and sensations. The reason why I think this is so important, the difference between emotions and sensations, is that when we use our thoughts to control ourselves, we're trying to force our bodies to do something. And I'm just going to use a brief example. I had a friend, one of my best friends in Austin. We fell out of friendship. I wouldn't necessarily say there was a dramatic falling out, but we were one day friends, and then as time went on, we were no longer friends. And this rattled me. It really impacted my life so dramatically. And I could just try to tell myself, get over it, Madeline. This friendship has ended. This friendship has expired. You're fine. You have other friends. Just get over it. And I think trying to tell myself, just get over it, of course, is what you would expect of yourself, or it's something you would frankly tell your friends. Oh, try to move on. Try to let it be in the past. But I couldn't. And it was so difficult. And no amount of talking about it, and even talking about it in therapy, which I did do, would make it better. I could not reason my way out of it. The loss that I experienced stuck with me for years, honestly. And I feel better about it today. But again, it was something that my body had to accept and not my mind. And I was really just always taught things from how you can control them from your mind and not letting it work its way through your body, more or less. And I am understanding the importance of that now. And to me, meditating is a tool that you can use to work through these, for lack of a better phrase, grieving elements. You can work through them just by sitting and observing your sensations and observing them in an unbiased way. Just observing and not judging and not trying to understand or ration your way through it. You're just sitting and experiencing. And even now, I still see myself trying to reason my way through things, but I understand fundamentally that I can't necessarily do that, or I won't have the conclusions that are truthful. I want to feel what is true and understand reality. And I don't know how much this is true for any of you listening, but I know that I've let my thoughts dictate my reality. I've let my thoughts just completely derail or completely go off on a tangent and just swirl and cloud my reality and cloud my judgment. But by trying to detach myself from my thoughts, it's allowing me to understand that what my body's sensing is real and that what whirlwind my thoughts are creating is a distraction. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from this meditation, is that my thoughts and a lot of my habit patterns, such as using my phone and just doom scrolling and swiping for no reason, are distractions. And I don't need to understand what I'm distracting myself from or why I'm having such a tendency to distract myself. But I know that reality comes from being in the present and experiencing your sensations. And even if my thoughts are acting as this sort of safety blanket, but it's a weird safety blanket because it's not even productive, I realize that my goal still is to get back on track, which is be in the present, be mindful, have gratitude, and focus on your sensations. And again, we're always told that being present and having gratitude and being mindful is the ultimate existence. But when you try to live those things just based on them in your mind versus feeling them in your body, it's not the same. It just does not resonate. And that's why my goal in this podcast is to try to shed some of the weight that our thoughts are creating so that we can experience what our body's realities are trying to tell us rather than what our minds are just trying to distract us from. Something else that makes this challenging to talk about is that I find myself having a limited vocabulary on this subject. And even the words for logic, thoughts, perception, all of the things that are cerebrally minded, psyche, I have a lot of potential synonyms, but sensory descriptors I really have a hard time finding other than the word senses. So my goal of this podcast is to try to connect with my guests on times when thoughts were really causing such a distraction, and understanding sometimes your thoughts are going to show up and they're going to get on the hamster wheel and you'll feel like you can't get off, but then eventually they go away. And that was one of the fundamental principles of the meditation, was that things will arise, but then they will also pass away. Scary thoughts will arise, but then they'll pass away. even beautiful times in your life will arise, and those also will pass away. So everything is impermanent. Everything is ever changing. And if we feel really stuck and really in a habit pattern that feels hard to break, it probably won't last forever. And everything in our life comes and goes. And that's something that I really think has a lot of value. And even there were times when I've had hobbies that I've really enjoyed and then I no longer have interest in anymore. And part of me really felt a loss from that. Like, why is something that was really important in my life no longer important? And why is it not fun for me anymore? Again, I don't need to come up with a reason for why it is or isn't important in my life, but I can recognize that it arose and it served me for a long time, and then it's not serving me anymore, and I'm going to find something else that will become a new phase in my life, and that's really beautiful, and that's something to be embraced, and that there are opportunities for new things to enjoy and embrace, and it's not worth it to feel regret or longing for something that doesn't need to be in the forefront of your life anymore. And that really can even relate to the friendship that I was mourning. But I was able to understand that or internalize that for my hobby, but maybe not for my friendship that I had lost. And just having these little realizations feels like a lot of progress in a lot of ways, because I know that we are all our own worst critics. I'm so much more harsh on myself and progress that I want to make in my own life than I would ever be on my friends or my family or any other person that's not me. So if I can recognize that even this podcasting in general, this is something that's new in my life, and it's something that I'm going to embrace today because it's relevant for me now. Perhaps won't last my entire adulthood, but if I was still holding on with a death grip to an old hobby that I didn't even care about anymore, and that was taking up space for me to start this new podcast, that's not productive, and that's not something that I want to be doing. So I think focusing our energy on things that deserve focus and that we want to be present for is something that really should be cherished. Again, this will probably be one of my only episodes on my own. Perhaps there will be times where I will be the lone host in the future, but I'm so excited to talk about intrusive thoughts and harbored thoughts with my guests coming up. So I will try to come up with a list of people in my life, or frankly, even strangers. I think everybody has an opinion on this, and I'm so curious to hear what people have to say about their thoughts and ways that they can let their thoughts be productive and try not to let them put them down to a doom spiral. We don't want to be in doom spiral mode. So with that, I think this will conclude episode 1, and I cannot wait to enter into episode 2 with some fun guests. That concludes this episode of Harbored Thoughts. Thanks for listening. The intro and outro music were composed and performed by Deuce Bennett. Check out his band, Deuce Bennett and the Tight Five. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Polly Morwood. Production and editing of this podcast were done by me, your host, Madeline Ackery.